Ethan never expected his routine walk home from work to lead to an encounter that would shift his entire world. As he strolled through the bustling streets of Westbridge City, he noticed a woman sitting quietly on the sidewalk. Her gaze held a quiet determination, despite her disheveled appearance. Drawn by an unshakable sense of compassion, he hesitated before offering her his hand, unaware that this seemingly small gesture would spark a series of events that would change his life forever. What secrets lay hidden in this moment, and how would they alter Ethan's path? Stay with us as we follow his journey of empathy and discovery. Let us know where you're tuning in from. And if this story resonates with you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of unexpected connections. The lively hum of rush hour echoed through the streets as Ethan navigated his way home after another demanding day at the firm. Briefcase in hand, he waded through the sea of suits, smartphones, and hurried footsteps. His thoughts drifted toward the solace of his small apartment and the quiet evening awaiting him. But as he turned onto a less crowded avenue, something caught his eye amidst the urban chaos. There, sitting against the cold brick wall, was a solitary figure. Her presence was a striking contrast to the flurry of passers-by. Ethan's pace slowed as his attention fixed on her, and his eyes fell on the cardboard sign she held. "Fallen on hard times. Any help appreciated." The woman appeared to be in her mid-30s. Her skin was a deep brown, her features framed by a strength and dignity that belied her circumstances. Her mismatched clothing bore the marks of wear and struggle, yet there was an undeniable grace in her posture that made Ethan stop in his tracks. Before he could think twice, he found himself standing in front of her. "Excuse me," he said, his voice gentler than he anticipated. "Are you all right?" She looked up, meeting his eyes with a piercing directness that caught him off guard. "As all right as one can be under the circumstances," she replied, her voice calm and articulate. Ethan shifted uncomfortably, suddenly hyper-aware of the divide between their lives. "I'm Ethan," he offered, extending his hand before realizing the gesture might seem awkward. To his relief, she took it, a firm grip that contradicted her frail appearance. "Mia," she said simply. "Mia," Ethan repeated, fumbling for the right words. "I don't mean to pry, but how did you end up here?" For a moment, a shadow crossed Mia's face. Ethan immediately regretted his question. But then she spoke, her tone steady and deliberate. "Life has a funny way of taking everything you thought you knew and turning it upside down," she said, offering a bittersweet smile. "I had it all once, a family, a career, dreams. But tragedy doesn't ask for permission. One loss followed another like dominoes until here I am." Her words were measured yet deeply poignant, and Ethan found himself captivated by her poise, even as she described her fall. "What kind of tragedy?" he asked softly, not wanting to push but unable to stop himself. Mia's gaze grew distant. "The kind that tears families apart," she said, her voice laced with pain. "I'd rather not go into the details, if you don't mind. Let's just say I lost everything that mattered, and getting back on your feet isn't as simple as people think." Ethan nodded, his throat tight with emotion. He'd heard stories like hers before, but something about Mia struck a deeper chord. There was an intelligence in her eyes, a resilience that moved him in a way he couldn't explain. "I'm so sorry," he said earnestly, though he knew how inadequate the words sounded. "Is there anything I can do to help?" Mia's expression flickered with something unreadable, part gratitude, part wariness. "You're kind to ask," she said, her tone even. "But I'm not looking for charity, just a chance to rebuild." Ethan nodded again, an idea forming in his mind before he could stop himself. "Actually," he began hesitantly, "there might be something." Mia arched an eyebrow, her curiosity piqued. "I work at Ryland Group," Ethan explained, the words rushing out faster than he intended. "We're having this big company party next week. Employees are supposed to bring a plus one, but—" He trailed off, suddenly self-conscious. "But you don't have a date." Mia finished for him, a glimmer of amusement breaking through her guarded demeanor. Ethan felt his cheeks flush. "Exactly," he admitted, fumbling to continue. "I thought, maybe you'd like to come? It could be a chance for a good meal, and who knows, maybe even some networking opportunities." He cringed as soon as the words left his mouth, realizing how presumptuous it sounded. "I mean, I'm sorry, that was probably out of line." But to his surprise, Mia didn't seem offended. Instead, her gaze turned thoughtful. "You're inviting me, a homeless woman you just met, to be your date at a corporate event?" she asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. When she put it that way, Ethan couldn't blame her for doubting him. "I know it sounds crazy," he admitted, "but there's something about you, Mia. I think you'd fit right in. And it's just one night." Mia studied him for a long moment, as if weighing his sincerity. Finally, she spoke. "That's unexpected," she said, her voice softening. "But if I wanted to go, I don't exactly have the wardrobe for a corporate event." Ethan's enthusiasm got the better of him. "We can figure that out," he said quickly. "I'd be happy to help with that. Nothing extravagant, of course, but—" He stopped himself, worried he might have overstepped. To his relief, Mia's lips curved into a faint smile. "Why are you doing this, Ethan?" she asked quietly. "You don't even know me. I could be anyone." Ethan paused, considering her question. Why was he doing this? It wasn't just pity. There was something about Mia that compelled him to help. Something that felt right. "I don't know," he admitted. "I just believe everyone deserves a chance. And something tells me you have a lot more to offer than you might think right now." Mia's expression softened further, a flicker of hope lighting her eyes. But then doubt crept in again. "I don't want to be anyone's charity case," she said firmly. "It's not charity," Ethan insisted. "Think of it as an opportunity for both of us. I get an interesting +1, and you get a break from—" He gestured vaguely at their surroundings. Mia chuckled, the sound warming the air between them. "You make a compelling argument, Ethan," she said. Then, after a moment's hesitation, she added, "All right, but on one condition." "Name it," Ethan said, his heart lifting. "If I do this," Mia said, her tone serious, "I want the chance to repay your kindness someday. I don't know how or when, but I need you to know I don't take this lightly." Ethan nodded, touched by her resolve. "Deal," he said. They shook hands, sealing their unusual agreement. As they did, Ethan felt a peculiar sensation that this moment was much more significant than it seemed. Little did he know just how much it would alter their lives. "So," Ethan said, his voice carrying a spark of excitement, "shall we go find you something to wear?" Mia hesitated for only a moment before nodding, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Lead the way, Ethan. This should be interesting." As they set off through the busy streets of Westbridge, an unlikely pair against the city's backdrop, Ethan felt a strange mix of anticipation and nervousness. What had he just signed himself up for? And more importantly, what surprises did Mia have in store? The soft chime of a bell greeted them as they stepped into Renew Threads, a modest clothing boutique tucked away in a quiet corner of the city. The store's name struck Ethan as fitting, given the circumstances, and he couldn't help but smile at the serendipity. "Welcome to Renew Threads," a cheerful voice called out. A middle-aged woman with warm eyes approached them, her gaze lingering curiously on Mia's worn clothing. "How can I help you today?" Ethan cleared his throat, suddenly hyper-aware of how unusual their request might sound. "We're looking for an outfit," he began, glancing at Mia for reassurance. "Something elegant, but not too flashy. It's for a corporate event." The shopkeeper's eyebrows rose slightly, but to her credit, she didn't bat an eye. "Of course," she said brightly. "Let's see what we can find." She gestured for Mia to follow her toward a rack of dresses, leaving Ethan standing near the door, feeling a little out of place. He watched as Mia moved among the fabrics, her fingers brushing over the textures with a wistfulness that hinted at a life once lived. There was a quiet longing in her expression, a mixture of nostalgia and uncertainty. After a few minutes, Ethan stepped closer. "See anything you like?" he asked gently. Mia turned to him, holding up a simple yet elegant black dress. "What do you think of this one?" Ethan studied it, nodding approvingly. "I think it's perfect. Why don't you try it on?" Mia hesitated, then disappeared into the fitting room. As Ethan waited, he couldn't help but wonder about the woman behind the guarded exterior. There was something about her poise, her sharp mind, that suggested a life far removed from her current circumstances. When the dressing room door finally opened, Ethan's breath caught. The transformation was striking. The dress fit Mia beautifully, highlighting her natural elegance. It was as though the fabric had stripped away her hardships, revealing the confident woman beneath. "Well?" she asked, her voice tinged with nervousness. "How does it look?" Ethan realized he'd been staring. "You look amazing," he said, his tone earnest, truly elegant. A faint blush rose to Mia's cheeks. "Thank you," she said softly. "It's been a long time since I've worn anything like this." Ethan smiled. "Well, you wear it beautifully." As Mia returned to the fitting room to change, Ethan found himself reflecting on the peculiar turn of events. What had started as a simple act of kindness had already begun to feel like something much more profound. He didn't know what the coming days would bring, but one thing was certain. Mia's story was far from over, and he was about to become a part of it. In the days that followed, Ethan ensured Mia had a warm place to stay and enough food to eat. On the afternoon of the party, he brought her to a small hair salon a few blocks from his apartment. As Mia settled into the stylist's chair, Ethan watched the transformation continue. The stylist worked with practiced ease, washing and sculpting Mia's hair into a graceful updo that perfectly complemented her new dress. During the process, their conversation flowed naturally, revealing more about each other than either had expected. "So, Ethan," Mia said, catching his gaze in the mirror, "tell me more about your job at Ryland Group. What exactly do you do there?" Ethan leaned forward slightly, warming to the topic. "I'm in the marketing department. Mostly, I work on strategies for new product launches and analyzing market trends. It's challenging but rewarding." Mia nodded, a thoughtful look crossing her face. "Sounds demanding. Do you enjoy it?" "Most of the time," Ethan replied, but then he hesitated, unsure how to put his lingering dissatisfaction into words. "Sometimes you feel like you could be doing more," Mia finished for him. Ethan blinked, surprised by her insight. "Exactly. How did you know?" Mia gave him an enigmatic smile. "Just a hunch. A lot of people in the corporate world feel that way at some point." Her comment piqued Ethan's curiosity. "You seem to know a lot about the business world," he observed. "Did you work in that field before?" He let the question hang, careful not to press too hard. Mia's expression flickered, as though she was debating whether to answer. Instead of replying directly, she offered a small, knowing smile and turned her attention back to the stylist. Ethan didn't push further, but the mystery only deepened. Who was Mia before life had brought her to the streets of Westbridge? The thought stayed with him as he prepared for the evening ahead. Little did he know, the answers he sought, and the surprises awaiting him, would soon unfold in ways he could never have imagined. A shadow briefly clouded Mia's face before it was replaced by a neutral expression. "Oh, I've dabbled here and there," she said vaguely. "You pick up things over time, you know." Ethan nodded, sensing her reluctance to delve deeper. Deciding not to press the matter, he shifted the conversation to safer ground. He began describing his colleagues and the office dynamics she might encounter at the party, weaving humor into his anecdotes to lighten the mood. As the stylist put the finishing touches on Mia's hair, Ethan couldn't help but marvel at the transformation. The woman reflected in the mirror looked worlds apart from the one he had met on the street only days ago. "What do you think?" Mia asked, turning to face him. "You look incredible," Ethan said sincerely. He hesitated, then added with a grin, "No one at the party will believe." He stopped mid-sentence, realizing how his words might sound. Mia raised an eyebrow, finishing for him with a matter-of-fact tone. "That I was homeless a few days ago." Ethan winced, but Mia only smiled. "It's okay, Ethan. We both know the truth. But for one night, it'll be nice to pretend, won't it?" Ethan nodded, his emotions a jumble of admiration and something else he couldn't quite name. "Shall we grab some dinner?" he suggested. "We've got a few hours before the party." They found a cozy Italian bistro tucked into a quiet corner not far from the salon. The warm glow of the restaurant's candles cast a serene light over their table as they settled in and perused the menu. As Ethan scanned the options, a surreal sense of disbelief washed over him. Here he was, sitting across from a woman he'd met on the street, preparing to take her to his company's biggest event of the year. The improbability of it all struck him again. As they waited for their food, Ethan began opening up to Mia in ways that surprised even himself. Maybe it was the anticipation of the evening ahead, or perhaps it was her attentive, non-judgmental demeanor. Either way, the words came tumbling out. "You know," he began, twirling a forkful of pasta once their meals arrived, "I've always dreamed of doing more than just marketing. I want to make a real difference in the company. changes that would benefit more than just the bottom line. Our employees, maybe even the community. Mia leaned forward, her eyes alight with genuine interest. That's admirable, Ethan. What kind of changes are you thinking about? Encouraged by her response, Ethan launched into a description of his ideas. Implementing sustainable business practices, starting mentorship programs for underprivileged youth, and fostering a workplace culture that valued people over profits. As he spoke, a renewed sense of passion filled his voice, as if these dreams had been waiting for the right moment to resurface. But then he sighed, the enthusiasm fading. The thing is, it's not easy to push for change when you're just a mid-level guy. Sometimes it feels like no matter how hard I try, I'm stuck. Like I'll never have the chance to make the kind of difference I want. Mia was quiet for a moment, a thoughtful expression on her face. Finally, she said, "You'd be surprised. Sometimes opportunities come from the most unexpected places. The key is to be ready for them when they do." Her words carried a weight that made Ethan pause. There was something in her tone, a hint of personal experience perhaps, that intrigued him. "It sounds like you're speaking from experience," he ventured. "Did you ever work in a corporate environment?" Mia's expression flickered, a cascade of emotions crossing her face too quickly for Ethan to interpret. Finally, she said carefully, "I've had some experiences in that world, but that was a long time ago. A different life, really." Ethan wanted to probe further, curious about the hints she kept dropping about her past. But something in her demeanor warned him to tread carefully. Instead, he redirected the conversation to lighter topics. Before long, they were laughing over shared observations about city life and swapping humorous anecdotes. The air between them grew warmer, more comfortable, as the evening progressed. For Ethan, it wasn't just Mia's stunning transformation that captivated him. It was her sharp intelligence, her wit, and the way she listened so intently when he spoke, offering thoughtful insights that often surprised him with their depth. By the time the meal ended, Ethan realized something unexpected. He was no longer just helping someone in need. He was genuinely drawn to Mia. Not just her story, but the person she was. And yet, beneath her calm exterior, Ethan sensed there was still so much more to her than she was letting on. Something told him that tonight's party would reveal even more surprises. Ethan found himself feeling something unexpected, a genuine connection with Mia. Just days ago, she had been a stranger on the street, yet now she felt like someone he'd known for years. There was so much more to her than met the eye, and Ethan felt an undeniable curiosity to uncover her mysteries. When they stepped out of the restaurant and began the walk to the venue, Ethan's emotions swirled, a mix of anticipation and nervous energy. He stole a glance at Mia, who looked radiant and self-assured, and tried to imagine how his colleagues would react when they saw her by his side. "Penny for your thoughts?" Mia asked, her voice light but inquisitive as she noticed his thoughtful expression. Ethan chuckled. "I was just thinking about how my coworkers are going to react when they see you," he admitted. "They're going to be, well, surprised, to say the least." Mia raised an eyebrow, a playful glint in her eye. "Surprised that you managed to find such a stunning date?" she teased, her voice tinged with amusement. Ethan felt his cheeks warm. "Well, yes," he said honestly, then quickly added, "Not that you're not stunning. You are. It's just, I'm not usually the guy who shows up with the most beautiful woman in the room, you know?" Mia's teasing expression softened. "Ethan," she said gently, "beauty isn't just about appearances. From what I've seen, you're a kind, thoughtful man with big dreams and a good heart. That's far more attractive than a pretty face." Her words landed with surprising force, touching Ethan deeply. He felt a swell of gratitude for her unexpected friendship. "Thank you, Mia," he said sincerely. "I'm really glad I met you, you know that?" Mia gave his arm a light squeeze, her smile warm. "The feeling's mutual, Ethan." As they approached the entrance of the Grand Riverview Hotel, where the event was being held, Ethan's nervousness crept back. He couldn't stop his mind from racing through possible scenarios. His boss's reaction, the inevitable whispers from his colleagues, the questions that would follow. What if they ask how we met? He wondered aloud, half to himself. Mia considered his question for a moment, her expression thoughtful. "We could tell them the truth," she suggested with a shrug. That you met me on the street and decided to invite me to the party. Ethan looked at her, surprised by her willingness to be so open. You'd be okay with that? Why not? Mia replied matter-of-factly. It's the truth, and it says a lot about your character, Ethan. Not many people would do what you did. Her honesty moved him, and he nodded, reassured. All right, he said. If anyone asks, we'll tell them the truth, or at least a version of it. They reached the hotel's ornate entrance, and Ethan paused, taking a steadying breath. Ready? He asked, offering Mia his arm. A mix of excitement and determination lit up her face as she took his arm. Ready, she replied. Together, they stepped into the hotel's opulent lobby, where the distant sounds of music and laughter floated out from the ballroom. Ethan felt his heart thrum with anticipation. Whatever the night had in store, he was certain it would be one to remember. As they neared the ballroom doors, Ethan caught their reflection in a large mirror. The image made him stop for a beat. They looked like the perfect power couple, poised and confident. For a fleeting moment, he almost believed the illusion himself. Here we go, he murmured, more to himself than to Mia. Mia gave his arm a reassuring squeeze. Remember, she said softly, you have nothing to be nervous about. Just be yourself, Ethan. That's more than enough. Her words calmed him, and with one last deep breath, he pushed open the heavy double doors. The sound of the party washed over them instantly. The cheerful clinking of glasses, the low hum of conversation, and the elegant strains of a string quartet tucked into one corner of the room. The Riverview Hotel's grand ballroom was a vision of sophistication, aglow with light from towering chandeliers. Elegantly dressed attendees mingled in small groups, their laughter and animated chatter filling the space. Crystal champagne flutes glimmered in the warm light, reflecting the splendor of the event. As Ethan and Mia stepped inside, the heavy oak doors swung shut behind them with a soft thud. A hush fell over the room as heads turned toward the entrance. Curiosity and surprise etched on many faces. Ethan felt the weight of their gazes and couldn't help but glance at Mia, who remained calm and composed, a faint smile gracing her lips. This is it, Ethan thought, a mix of anticipation and apprehension tightening his chest. Whatever awaited them tonight, it was bound to leave an indelible mark on both their lives. Ethan stepped into the grand ballroom of the Riverview Hotel, his heart pounding as Mia walked beside him, poised and graceful. For a brief moment, it felt like the entire room had turned to look at them, and in truth, many had. Mia, in her understated black dress, seemed to radiate elegance, her presence commanding attention without effort. Ethan, who typically faded into the background at such events, felt buoyed by her confidence. Is that Ethan from marketing? A voice murmured, barely audible over the soft strains of the string quartet. Who's the woman with him? Came another, this time louder, brimming with curiosity. As they moved further into the crowd, Ethan could feel the weight of countless eyes on them and hear the hum of speculative whispers. He glanced sideways at Mia, concerned that the attention might unsettle her. Instead, he found her smiling serenely, her posture exuding self-assurance. You okay? He asked, leaning in close enough for only her to hear. Mia gave his arm a reassuring squeeze. I'm fine, Ethan. Don't worry about me. Just enjoy the evening. Her calm demeanor eased his nerves, but before he could respond, a small group of his colleagues approached. Among them was Sophie, a vibrant account manager known for her bluntness. Ethan, Sophie exclaimed, her gaze darting between him and Mia. You've been keeping secrets. Who's your stunning date? Ethan drew in a deep breath, bracing for the barrage of questions. Everyone, this is Mia. Mia, these are some of my colleagues, Sophie, Jason, and Mark. Mia extended her hand warmly. It's lovely to meet you all. Ethan's told me so much about his work here at Ryland Group. As handshakes were exchanged, Ethan could see the curiosity burning in his colleagues' eyes. It was Jason who finally asked the question they were all thinking. So, Mia, he began, grinning, how did you and Ethan meet? We had no idea he was seeing anyone. Ethan opened his mouth to answer, but Mia was quicker. Oh, Ethan and I met not too long ago, actually, she began, a mischievous glint in her eye as she glanced at him. Ethan nodded, silently giving her the go-ahead to continue. You see, Mia continued with a smile, Ethan found me on the street. I've been going through some tough times, and in an extraordinary act of kindness, he invited me to be his date for tonight. The group fell silent, their expressions ranging from shock to disbelief. Ethan felt his face flush with heat, unsure how they would react. Mark was the first to break the silence, letting out a low whistle. "Well, I'll be damned, Ethan. That's something else. You've always been a stand-up guy." Sophie, however, appeared skeptical. "On the street? No offense, Mia, but you look like you just stepped out of a fashion spread. Are you sure you're not pulling our leg?" Mia's smile didn't waver. "I promise, it's the truth. Ethan's kindness went beyond inviting me tonight. He also helped me prepare for the evening. I'm deeply grateful for everything he's done." As the conversation continued, Ethan could see the gears turning in his colleagues' heads. From nearby, he caught snippets of whispered remarks. "Do you think he hired her? Maybe she's some kind of consultant. No way that story's true. She has to be someone important." Despite the murmurs, Ethan found himself beginning to relax. Mia handled the conversation with effortless poise, asking thoughtful questions about his colleagues, roles at Ryland Group, and sharing witty anecdotes that had the group laughing. Even Sophie's initial skepticism began to fade under Mia's charm. As the evening wore on, Ethan and Mia mingled through the room, moving from one group to another. To Ethan's amazement, Mia seemed entirely at ease, engaging with everyone from junior staff to senior executives. Her ability to connect with people, coupled with her apparent knowledge of the industry, left him both impressed and increasingly curious. During a conversation with the head of research and development, Mia made an insightful comment about the challenges of sustainable innovation. The executive paused, clearly taken aback. "You seem to have a deep understanding of this field," he said, his tone a mix of surprise and respect. "Have you worked in this industry before?" Mia's response was characteristically enigmatic. "Let's just say I've picked up a few things along the way," she replied with a knowing smile. As they moved on to the next group, Ethan couldn't hold back his thoughts any longer. "Mia," he said quietly, "how do you know so much about all this? You're not just holding your own, you're leading these conversations." Mia smiled at him, a mix of amusement and mystery in her expression. "I've had experiences," she said simply. "Perhaps I'll share more someday." Her words only deepened the intrigue Ethan felt. But for now, he chose to focus on the present, watching as Mia continued to navigate the evening with grace and confidence. Whatever her story was, it was clear that Mia was far more than she appeared to be. And Ethan couldn't help but feel that this night was only the beginning of uncovering the truth. As the evening wore on, Ethan began to notice a growing energy in the room. Groups of attendees exchanged whispers, their tones tinged with anticipation. "Is Mr. Calloway here yet?" someone murmured nearby. "I heard he might not make it." "The CEO always gives a speech at these events, doesn't he?" another replied. Ethan turned to Mia. "They're talking about our CEO, Richard Calloway. He usually makes an appearance at these galas, but no one seems to have spotted him yet." Mia nodded, but her expression shifted ever so slightly. Something unreadable flickered in her eyes. "Yes, I gathered," she said evenly. "Tell me, Ethan, what's he like?" Ethan considered the question. "He's brilliant, no doubt about that. He built this company from scratch, and he commands a lot of respect. But he's intense. Some find him intimidating. There have been rumors lately that he's been dealing with some personal issues, though no one knows the details." Mia opened her mouth as if to ask another question, but at that moment a hush fell over the room. Ethan followed the collective gaze of the crowd toward the entrance. There, Richard Calloway had arrived at last. The CEO cut an imposing figure as he strode into the ballroom. Tall and distinguished, with a commanding presence, his silver hair and piercing blue eyes only added to his air of authority. Conversations quieted as people stepped aside to let him pass, offering nods of respect. Beside Ethan, Mia stiffened. Concerned, he turned to her and was startled by the intensity of emotion on her face. Fear. Hope. Something else entirely. "Mia," he said softly, "are you all right?" But Mia's attention was fixed entirely on Richard Calloway, who was scanning the room with purpose. Suddenly, his gaze locked onto their position, and Ethan saw a flicker of shock cross the CEO's usually composed features. In an instant, Calloway began moving toward them, his pace quick and deliberate. The crowd parted before him, whispers of confusion rippling in his wake. Ethan felt frozen, rooted to the spot. He opened his mouth to introduce Mia, but the words died on his lips as he saw the look exchanged between his date and his CEO. "Eleanor," Calloway breathed, his voice low and filled with disbelief and hope. "Mia, no." Eleanor, as Ethan now realized, took a small step forward, her eyes locked on Calloway's. "Hello, Richard," she said softly. The room was utterly silent. It felt as though time itself had slowed, every person straining to understand what was happening. Richard reached out with a trembling hand, gently touching Eleanor's cheek as though to confirm she was real. "Is it really you?" he whispered, his voice breaking. "After all this time?" Tears welled in Eleanor's eyes as she nodded. "Yes, Richard. It's me. I'm so sorry. I've been gone so long." In a move that stunned everyone in the room, Richard Calloway, normally the epitome of composure, pulled Eleanor into a fierce embrace. His shoulders trembled as he whispered, loud enough for those nearby to hear, "You came back. I thought I'd lost you forever." Ethan stood frozen, his mind racing to catch up with the scene unfolding before him. The woman he had met on the street, the one he thought he was helping, was clearly someone else entirely. Eleanor wasn't just anyone. She was Richard Calloway's long-lost wife. As they moved away from the conversation, Ethan couldn't hold back his curiosity any longer. "Mia," he began, "how do you know so much about all of this? It's not just small talk. You genuinely understand the details. It's impressive." Mia gave him a mysterious smile. "Let's just say I've lived an interesting life, Ethan. Perhaps I'll share the full story with you someday." Though his curiosity burned, Ethan chose not to press her further. Instead, he focused on enjoying Mia's company. She had an uncanny ability to elevate every interaction, leaving people smiling or intrigued after even the briefest conversation. As the evening wore on, Ethan began to notice a growing energy in the room. Groups of attendees exchanged whispers, their tones tinged with anticipation. "Is Mr. Calloway here yet?" someone murmured nearby. "I heard he might not make it." "The CEO always gives a speech at these events, doesn't he?" another replied. Ethan turned to Mia. "They're talking about our CEO, Richard Calloway. He usually makes an appearance at these galas, but no one seems to have spotted him yet." Mia nodded, but her expression shifted ever so slightly. Something unreadable flickered in her eyes. "Yes, I gathered," she said evenly. "Tell me, Ethan, what's he like?" Ethan considered the question. "He's brilliant, no doubt about that. He built this company from scratch, and he commands a lot of respect. But he's intense. Some find him intimidating. There have been rumors lately that he's been dealing with some personal issues, though no one knows the details." Mia opened her mouth as if to ask another question, but at that moment, a hush fell over the room. Ethan followed the collective gaze of the crowd toward the entrance. There, Richard Calloway had arrived at last. The CEO cut an imposing figure as he strode into the ballroom. Tall and distinguished, with a commanding presence, his silver hair and piercing blue eyes only added to his air of authority. Conversations quieted as people stepped aside to let him pass, offering nods of respect. Beside Ethan, Mia stiffened. Concerned, he turned to her and was startled by the intensity of emotion on her face. Fear, hope, something else entirely. "Mia," he said softly, "are you all right?" But Mia's attention was fixed entirely on Richard Calloway, who was scanning the room with purpose. Suddenly, his gaze locked onto their position, and Ethan saw a flicker of shock cross the CEO's usually composed features. In an instant, Calloway began moving toward them, his pace quick and deliberate. The crowd parted before him, whispers of confusion rippling in his wake. Ethan felt frozen, rooted to the spot. He opened his mouth to introduce Mia, but the words died on his lips as he saw the look exchanged between his date and his CEO. "Eleanor," Calloway breathed, his voice low and filled with disbelief and hope. Mia, no Eleanor, as Ethan now realized, took a small step forward, her eyes locked on Calloway's. "Hello, Richard," she said softly. The room was utterly silent. It felt as though time itself had slowed, every person straining to understand what was happening. Richard reached out with a trembling hand, gently touching Eleanor's cheek as though to confirm she was real. "Is it really you?" he whispered, his voice breaking. "After all this time?" Tears welled in Eleanor's eyes as she nodded. "Yes, Richard. It's me. I'm so sorry I've been gone so long." In a move that stunned everyone in the room, Richard Calloway, normally the epitome of composure, pulled Eleanor into a fierce embrace. His shoulders trembled as he whispered, loud enough for those nearby to hear, "You came back. I thought I'd lost you forever." Ethan stood frozen, his mind racing to catch up with the scene unfolding before him. The woman he had met on the street, the one he thought he was helping, was clearly someone else entirely. Eleanor wasn't just anyone. She was Richard Calloway's long-lost wife. The silence in the room was deafening. Ethan stood frozen, his mind racing to make sense of what he had just witnessed. The woman he had met on the street, the one he had invited to this gala, was Richard Calloway's wife. How could this even be possible? As the reunited couple separated, Richard kept one protective arm around Eleanor's waist and turned to address the stunned crowd. His face, a blend of joy and resolve, bore the unmistakable gravity of the moment. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice regaining its usual commanding tone, "I apologize for my late arrival and for the unconventional nature of this scene. Allow me to introduce, or rather, reintroduce, my wife, Eleanor Calloway." A collective gasp rippled through the guests. Ethan felt as though the ground beneath him was shifting. He had known Mia, no Eleanor, for just a few days. Yet in that time, he had begun to care for her deeply. To discover that she was not only married, but married to the CEO of Calloway Industries was almost too much for him to process. Richard continued, his voice steady, either oblivious to or deliberately ignoring the shock emanating from the crowd. "Eleanor has been away for some time. Her return is unexpected, but it is more welcome than I can put into words." Eleanor then spoke, her voice clear and composed despite the evident emotion in her eyes. "I owe you all an explanation, and I will provide it in time," she said, her gaze sweeping the room. "For now, I will simply say that I needed to step away from my life for a while to gain a new perspective. I've learned so much during my time away, about myself and about the world we live in." She turned then to Ethan, her expression softening into something that resembled gratitude and affection. "I owe a particular debt of thanks to Ethan here," she said. "He showed me extraordinary kindness when I was at my lowest. He is a credit to this company and to humanity." Ethan felt every eye in the room turn toward him. His heart raced as he struggled to respond, to ask the thousand questions tumbling through his mind, but the words refused to come. Richard's gaze shifted to Ethan, a blend of gratitude and curiosity evident in his piercing eyes. "Ethan," he said, "I don't know the full story of how you and Eleanor met, but it seems I owe you an enormous debt of thanks. We'll discuss this more at a later time, I'm sure." As murmurs began to rise from the assembled guests, Richard raised his voice once more. "I know you all have questions. Eleanor and I have much to discuss ourselves. For now, I ask that you respect our privacy and allow us this moment of reunion. Please enjoy the rest of your evening. There will be time for explanations later." With that, Richard began to guide Eleanor away, presumably to find a quieter space to talk. As they passed Ethan, Eleanor paused. She reached out to squeeze his hand gently. "Thank you, Ethan," she said softly, her eyes filled with unspoken emotion. "For everything. I promise, we'll talk soon." And then she was gone, leaving Ethan standing alone in a sea of bewildered onlookers. The room quickly filled with a buzz of excited and speculative conversation as the guests tried to make sense of what they had just seen. Ethan, however, felt detached from it all, as though he were watching everything through a fog. A hand on his shoulder startled him, and he turned to see Sophie standing there, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Ethan," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "what just happened? Did you know about Mia? I mean, Eleanor?" Ethan shook his head, still struggling to find his voice. "No," he managed at last. "I had no idea. I really did meet her on the street. She seemed." He trailed off, unable to reconcile the homeless woman he had encountered with the elegant and composed wife of Richard Calloway. It felt as though the world had tilted on its axis, leaving him scrambling to find his footing. As the party continued, alternating between bursts of gossip and strained attempts at normalcy, Ethan found himself moving almost unconsciously toward the bar. He needed something, anything to ground himself, to help him make sense of the whirlwind of events. The bartender looked up as he approached, his expression sympathetic. "Rough night, huh?" Ethan let out a breathless laugh, shaking his head. "You have no idea." He accepted the drink placed before him, the amber liquid reflecting the ballroom's glittering lights. As he took a sip, The warmth spread through him, offering a momentary reprieve from the chaos swirling in his mind. What had started as an act of kindness had become something far more profound and infinitely more complicated. And as much as Ethan wanted answers, he knew this night had only raised more questions. He had arrived at this gala with a simple goal: to make a good impression on his colleagues, maybe even catch the attention of the higher-ups at Callaway Industries. Instead, he'd been pulled into a drama that felt too surreal to be real. The woman he thought he was rescuing, the one he'd been helping out of kindness, had turned out to be someone else entirely. Someone with a history and connections he could never have imagined. As Ethan stood at the bar, lost in thought, the weight of the evening settled over him. Everything had changed. His relationship with Mia, no, Eleanor, was no longer what he thought it was. Whatever had been growing between them felt irrevocably altered. And then there was his place in the company. The attention he'd drawn tonight would have ripple effects he couldn't yet predict. Would Richard Callaway demand answers about how they met? Would this night become a turning point in his career, or a dead end? Ethan took another sip of his whiskey, his mind a whirlwind of questions. One thing was certain: life at Callaway Industries was about to get very interesting. The party continued around him, though the air was thick with a surreal mixture of whispers and awkward attempts at normalcy. Small groups huddled together, speaking in hushed tones as they tried to make sense of the shocking revelations. Ethan remained by the bar, feeling detached from the scene unfolding around him. He had come here hoping to advance his career, and now he was the center of attention for reasons he couldn't have foreseen. "Ethan." The familiar voice broke through his haze, and he turned to see Jack, the senior marketing manager, approaching with a concerned expression. "Hey, Jack," Ethan said, forcing a weak smile. Jack settled onto the bar stool next to him and signaled the bartender for a drink. "Hell of a night, huh?" he said, his tone a mix of astonishment and sympathy. Ethan let out a dry chuckle. "You could say that again." They sat in silence for a moment, both seemingly lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Jack spoke. "Look, Ethan, I don't know exactly what went down tonight, but I'll say this. What you did, helping someone you thought was homeless, bringing her here, that's admirable. Whatever happens next, you should be proud of yourself." Ethan felt a lump rise in his throat at Jack's words. He swallowed hard, nodding. "Thanks, Jack, I appreciate that. I can't believe I didn't know. How could I not have realized who she was?" Jack shook his head. "Don't beat yourself up over it. From what I've heard, Eleanor Callaway's been off the radar for years. If she was trying to keep her identity hidden, she clearly did one hell of a job." As they continued to talk, Ethan felt some of the tension begin to leave his shoulders. Jack's support meant more than he realized, and for the first time that evening, he felt a small sense of relief. The buzz of the room began to quiet as the party wound down. Conversations turned to speculation and soft murmurs, and the once vibrant ballroom felt subdued. Ethan, still seated at the bar, took a moment to process everything. What had started as a simple act of kindness had spiraled into something far greater and more complex. The events of this night had set something in motion, something that would change not only his life, but potentially the entire company. With a deep breath, Ethan straightened his shoulders and turned to face the room. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he would meet them head-on. After all, he thought with a wry smile, he'd already survived the most dramatic office party in Callaway Industries history. How much crazier could things get? Little did Ethan know, the night's revelations were only the beginning. A journey lay ahead, one that would challenge everything he thought he understood about business, compassion, and the unexpected power of human connection. For now, though, he took solace in the thought that he'd face the evening with integrity. Whatever came next, he was ready to confront it. Jack's words of support stayed with Ethan, grounding him as he struggled to process the night's events. Suddenly, a ripple of silence spread across the room. Ethan looked up to see Richard Callaway re-entering the ballroom, with Eleanor by his side. The CEO's face was a mask of calm, but Ethan could see the complex emotions simmering beneath the surface. Joy, confusion, and a trace of unease. Richard cleared his throat and the quiet deepened. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his voice steady and authoritative despite the unusual circumstances. I want to thank you all for your understanding and discretion tonight. I know the events of this evening have come as a surprise to many of you. They have certainly been a surprise to me as well. He paused, his sharp gaze sweeping across the room before landing squarely on Ethan. I owe a particular debt of gratitude to one of our employees, Ethan Carter, from the marketing department. Ethan, would you please join us? Ethan's heart leapt into his throat. His legs felt unsteady as he made his way through the crowd, acutely aware of every pair of eyes following him. As he reached Richard and Eleanor, he noticed a flicker of warmth in Eleanor's expression, tinged with what looked like regret. Ethan, Richard said, placing a hand on his shoulder. I understand you met my wife under highly unusual circumstances. You extended kindness to her at a time when she was in need, and for that, I cannot thank you enough. Ethan swallowed hard, struggling to find his voice. I just did what anyone would do, sir, he managed. Richard shook his head, a faint smile forming at the corners of his mouth. No, Ethan. What you did is far from ordinary. You saw someone in need and acted without hesitation, expecting nothing in return. That kind of compassion is rare, and it is precisely the type of character we value at Callaway Industries. He turned to address the rest of the room. I know many of you are curious about the circumstances leading to tonight's revelations. I assure you, all will be explained in due time. For now, I ask for your continued understanding and respect as Eleanor and I navigate this deeply personal reunion. The room erupted in applause. Ethan stood there, feeling both exposed and oddly buoyed by the CEO's words. He glanced at Eleanor, who offered him a small, grateful smile. Ethan, she said softly, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes, I owe you an explanation and an apology. Would you be willing to meet with Richard and me tomorrow? There's a lot to discuss. Ethan nodded, still dazed. Of course, Mrs. Callaway, I'd like that. As the party began to wind down, Ethan found himself surrounded by colleagues. They offered congratulations and peppered him with questions he couldn't yet answer. Through it all, his mind raced, replaying the night's events and trying to anticipate what tomorrow's meeting might bring. The next morning dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the emotional whirlwind Ethan was still caught in. Sleep had eluded him, his mind endlessly rehashing the revelations of the previous evening. He arrived at Callaway Industries headquarters early, the towering glass and steel building gleaming in the morning light. As he checked in at the front desk, the security guard gave him a curious look. No doubt word of the gala's drama had spread quickly. Mr. Carter? A polished voice called as Ethan stepped onto the executive floor. A well-dressed assistant approached him with a professional smile. Mr. and Mrs. Callaway are expecting you. Please follow me. She led him down a wide hallway to a spacious corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. Richard stood as Ethan entered, extending his hand in greeting. Ethan? Thank you for coming, he said warmly. Eleanor sat on a plush leather sofa, the epitome of composure in a tailored suit. She looked every bit the corporate wife, a striking contrast to the woman Ethan had met on the street just days ago. Richard Callaway said, gesturing for him to take a seat. I imagine you have 1,000 questions. We'll do our best to answer them. Ethan settled into the plush armchair, his gaze darting between Richard and Eleanor. I appreciate that, sir. I have to admit, I'm still trying to make sense of all this. Eleanor leaned forward, her eyes meeting Ethan's. Ethan, I want to start by apologizing. I never meant to deceive you. When you found me on that street, I was at the lowest point in my life. Your kindness meant more to me than you could ever know. Ethan nodded slowly, silently encouraging her to continue. Taking a deep breath, Eleanor began her story. 3 years ago, I reached a breaking point. Richard and I had been married for 15 years, and on the surface, we had it all. Success, respect, stability. But inside, I felt empty, lost, like I had drifted too far from who I truly was and what really mattered. Richard reached out and took Eleanor's hand, the simple gesture brimming with unspoken emotion. Ethan felt a pang in his chest, regret perhaps, or longing for something he couldn't quite define. I knew I needed to step away from everything, Eleanor continued, her voice gaining strength. I had to strip away all the trappings of my life and rediscover myself. So without telling anyone, not even Richard, I left. I gave away most of my possessions, kept just a little cash, and set out to live on the streets. Ethan's eyes widened. But why? Why go to such extremes? Eleanor's gaze grew distant. I needed to understand, Ethan. I needed to know what it was like to have nothing, to rely on the kindness of strangers. I wanted to see the world from an entirely different perspective, and I did. The things I saw, the people I met, it changed me in ways I'm still trying to comprehend. Richard's voice broke through, low and weighted with both pain and admiration. When Eleanor disappeared, I was devastated. I hired private investigators, launched searches across the country, but she vanished without a trace. Those were the hardest years of my life. Eleanor squeezed her husband's hand. I know I hurt you, Richard. That was never my intention. But this journey, it was something I needed to do, for myself and ultimately for us. Ethan leaned back in his chair, overwhelmed as he tried to absorb the magnitude of what he was hearing. So when I found you, I had been living rough for nearly 3 years, Eleanor confirmed. By then, I was exhausted, hungry, and questioning everything I'd done. And then you came along, Ethan. Your kindness, your genuine desire to help, it reminded me of why I started this journey, to find the good in humanity, to understand the struggles of those less fortunate. Richard leaned forward, his piercing gaze fixed on Ethan. Ethan, when you brought Eleanor to that party, you didn't just reunite me with my wife. You reminded both of us of something invaluable, that there are still people in this world willing to extend a hand to those in need without expecting anything in return. You showed us the kind of compassion that should be at the core of our personal lives and our business. Ethan felt a wave of emotion swell within him. I don't know what to say. I just did what felt right in the moment. And that, Eleanor said softly, her voice tinged with gratitude, is exactly what makes it so remarkable. You acted out of pure compassion, Ethan. Do you know how rare that is in today's world? Richard nodded, his expression earnest. Which brings us to why we asked you here today. Eleanor picked up the thread seamlessly. My journey has opened our eyes to some difficult truths about Callaway Industries and about society as a whole. We've come to realize that we need to make real, meaningful changes. Changes that won't just affect our bottom line, but will truly make a difference in the lives of people who need it most. Ethan leaned forward, his heart pounding as he began to sense the gravity of what was coming next. This conversation was about more than Eleanor's story. It was about something much bigger. Something that might just reshape everything he thought he knew. Ethan leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. What kind of changes are we talking about, sir? Richard Callaway's expression grew purposeful. We want to launch a major corporate social responsibility initiative, one that goes far beyond the usual PR-friendly donations. This will make a tangible difference in people's lives. We're talking about job training programs for the homeless, partnerships with shelters and food banks, and even a microloan program to help people get back on their feet. Eleanor picked up where her husband left off. And we want you to lead this initiative, Ethan. Your compassion, your willingness to step in and help others, that's exactly the kind of leadership we need for this project. Ethan felt as if the wind had been knocked out of him. Me? But I'm just a mid-level marketing guy. I don't have experience with anything like this. Richard smiled, his gaze steady. Sometimes, Ethan, experience is less important than heart. You have the instincts, the compassion, and the drive to make this work. We'll provide you with the resources and support you need. What do you say? Ethan's mind reeled. Just days ago, he had been yearning for an opportunity to make a meaningful impact in his work. Now, here it was. A chance beyond anything he could have dreamed of. I don't know what to say, he stammered. This is incredible. Are you sure I'm the right person for this? Eleanor reached out, her hand resting gently on his arm. Ethan, when you found me on that street, you didn't see a homeless woman. You saw a person who needed help. That perspective, that humanity, it's exactly what this initiative needs. You've seen both sides of the coin now. You can bridge the gap between the corporate world and the people who need our help most. Ethan took a deep breath. A sense of purpose began to settle over him, firm and undeniable. Okay, he said, a smile breaking across his face. I'm in. Let's do this. Richard beamed and stood, extending his hand. Excellent. We'll set up a meeting later this week to start hammering out the details. This is the beginning of a new chapter for Callaway Industries, and for you, Ethan. As Ethan left the office, his mind buzzed with ideas and possibilities. He couldn't help but marvel at how his life had pivoted so dramatically. A simple act of kindness on the street had led to this, a chance to create real lasting change. He thought back to the woman he had first met as Mia. She had seemed so lost, so vulnerable, yet she had possessed the courage to strip everything away in search of a deeper truth. Ethan felt a renewed sense of admiration for Eleanor Callaway and the journey she had undertaken. When he reached the bustling lobby, Ethan paused. He looked around at the employees rushing to and fro, their lives seemingly so far removed from the struggles Eleanor had described. How many of them, he wondered, had ever really seen the world beyond these walls? How many had extended a hand to someone in need, with no expectation of anything in return? Stepping out into the sunlight, Ethan felt a renewed sense of determination. He had work to do, important work that could change lives. As he walked down the crowded street, he found himself seeing the people around him differently. The hurried businesswoman, the tired construction worker, the elderly man struggling with his groceries, each of them had a story. Each of them mattered. His phone buzzed in his pocket, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a message from Eleanor. Thank you again, Ethan, for everything. This is just the beginning. He smiled, tucking the phone back into his pocket. Yes, this was just the beginning. In the days and weeks that followed, Ethan threw himself into his new role with a passion that surprised even himself. He met with community leaders, visited shelters and soup kitchens, and spent countless hours researching successful social programs around the world. The initiative, which they named Callaway Cares, quickly began to take shape. It was more than a corporate responsibility program. It was a movement with the potential to transform lives. Ethan knew the journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in his career, he felt he was exactly where he was meant to be. The initiative Ethan led wasn't just a corporate social responsibility program. It was a bold, comprehensive approach to tackling homelessness and poverty in the community. His first major project was the opening of a job training center in one of the city's most underserved neighborhoods. The center offered classes in everything from basic computer skills to advanced manufacturing techniques, all taught by volunteers from Callaway Industries. It was designed to be a bridge to opportunity, equipping people with the tools they needed to rebuild their lives. As Ethan stood at the podium on the center's grand opening day, a wave of pride washed over him. It was unlike anything he had felt before. He looked out at the crowd, a diverse mix of Callaway employees, local residents, and members of the media. In their eyes, he saw something remarkable: hope. Today, he began, his voice steady and resolute, we're not just opening a building. We're opening doors to opportunity. We're extending a hand to those who need it most, not just offering help, but offering hope. As he continued to speak, Ethan's eyes found Eleanor and Richard Callaway in the front row. Eleanor gave him an encouraging nod, her eyes gleaming with pride. Richard, too, looked on with approval, a man visibly transformed by his wife's journey and the new mission of his company. After the ceremony, as Ethan mingled with the crowd, he felt a tap on his shoulder. Turning, he found himself face to face with Sophie, his colleague from marketing. Ethan, she said, her voice brimming with admiration, I have to admit, when I first heard about your new role, I was skeptical. But seeing all this... She gestured around at the bustling center. It's incredible. You've really found your calling, haven't you? Ethan smiled, feeling warmth that spread through his chest. I think I have, Sophie. Who would have thought that a chance encounter on the street could lead to all this? As the day wound down, Ethan found a quiet moment to step outside. The cool evening air was a welcome reprieve, and he watched as the street filled with people heading home, much like that fateful day when he met Eleanor. A figure approached, a woman with worn clothes and a tattered cardboard sign in her hands. For a moment, Ethan was transported back to that day, half expecting to see Eleanor's face. But this was someone else, older, her face lined with hardship. She hesitated as she drew closer, her eyes unsure of how he might react. Ethan's response was immediate and warm. "Good evening," he said with a kind smile. "Are you hungry? We have plenty of food inside from the event. Why don't you come join us?" The woman's eyes widened in surprise, then filled with grateful tears. Ethan gently led her inside, feeling a profound sense of purpose wash over him. This was why he was here. Later that night, as Ethan prepared to leave the center, he found Eleanor waiting for him by the door. "You did good today, Ethan," she said softly, her voice filled with sincerity. "Really good." Ethan nodded, a lump forming in his throat. "Thank you, Eleanor, for everything. If you hadn't taken that journey, if we hadn't met that day." Eleanor placed a hand on his arm, her touch steady and reassuring. "Sometimes, Ethan, the universe has a way of putting the right people in the right place at the right time. You were meant to find me that day, just as you were meant to be here, doing this work." As Ethan drove home that night, he reflected on the incredible journey of the past few months. What had started as a simple act of kindness had transformed his life. He had gone from an ordinary employee to someone leading a movement of change. It all seemed like a dream. But it wasn't a dream, it was real. Ethan knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Changing lives and reshaping corporate culture came with challenges, but he was ready for them. More than ready, he was excited. As he pulled into his driveway, his phone buzzed with a new text. It was from Richard. "Great work today, Ethan. Remember, this is just the beginning. Together, we're going to change the world." Ethan smiled, tucking the phone into his pocket. Yes, this was just the beginning. And what a beginning it was. Ethan smiled, feeling a surge of both excitement and determination. He knew Richard Calloway was right. Over the next year, Ethan poured himself into his work with a level of dedication that surprised even him. The Calloway Cares initiative grew rapidly, its reach expanding far beyond the initial job training center. Under Ethan's leadership, the program launched a series of groundbreaking projects aimed at addressing homelessness and poverty on multiple fronts. The initiative quickly gained momentum, attracting attention well beyond the local community. News outlets began highlighting Calloway Industries as a pioneer in corporate social responsibility, praising its innovative and hands-on approach. Soon, other companies started reaching out to Ethan, seeking his guidance to create similar programs. One crisp autumn morning, nearly a year after the launch of Calloway Cares, Ethan found himself back in Richard's office. The CEO's demeanor was serious as Ethan took a seat across from him. "Ethan," Richard began, his tone steady, "I hope you know how proud we are of the work you've done this past year. The impact you've made, it's beyond anything we could have imagined." Ethan nodded, his emotions a mix of pride and humility. "Thank you, sir. It's been an incredible journey." Richard leaned forward, his piercing gaze locking onto Ethan's, which is why what I'm about to say isn't easy. Ethan straightened in his seat, his curiosity piqued. "We've been approached by a coalition of major corporations," Richard explained. "They want to take the Calloway Cares model national." Ethan's eyes widened. "National? That's amazing." "It is," Richard agreed, though his expression carried a hint of gravity. "But here's the thing, Ethan. They want you to lead it." The words hung in the air between them, and for a moment Ethan felt as if the room had tilted. "Me? But what about Calloway Industries? What about the work we're doing here?" Richard gave him a small, bittersweet smile. "The work will continue. We've built something extraordinary, something that will endure. But this is a chance to impact lives on a scale we never dreamed possible." Ethan sat back, his thoughts swirling. Just a year ago, he had been a mid-level marketing employee, dreaming of making a difference. Now he was being offered the opportunity to shape national policy on corporate social responsibility. I don't know what to say," he finally managed. "Say you'll think about it," Richard replied gently. "Take some time. Talk it over with Eleanor. She's been as much a part of this journey as any of us." Ethan nodded, still dazed as he left the office. His feet carried him almost unconsciously to the Calloway Cares Center, now a hub of activity. Inside, a computer class was in full swing in one corner, a resume workshop buzzed with energy in another, and a group of women animatedly discussed their small business ventures nearby. Ethan stood in the middle of it all, taking it in. A lump formed in his throat as he watched the vibrant community that had grown from an idea. This was it. Real people. Real lives being transformed. Could he really leave this behind? Lost in thought, Ethan almost didn't notice the young woman approaching him. "Excuse me," she said hesitantly, her voice soft but determined. "Are you Ethan Carter?" "Yes, I am," he replied with a warm smile. "How can I help you?" The woman, perhaps in her early 20s, took a deep breath. "My name is Sarah. I just wanted to thank you. A year ago, I was living in my car, no job, no prospects. Then I heard about this place, the job training program, the microloan. It changed my life. I have my own catering business now, and I've even started hiring other people from the program." Ethan's heart swelled with emotion. "Sarah, that's incredible. I'm so happy for you." Sarah smiled, her eyes shining with gratitude. "I just wanted you to know what you're doing here. It matters. It really, really matters." As Sarah walked away, Ethan felt a wave of clarity wash over him. Pulling out his phone, he dialed a familiar number. "Eleanor," he said when she picked up. "It's Ethan. I need your advice." Later that evening, Ethan sat in the Calloway's living room, cradling a cup of coffee. He laid out the situation before Eleanor and Richard, his voice a mix of excitement and apprehension. "So that's where things stand," he concluded. "This national initiative, it's an incredible opportunity, but I can't shake the feeling that I'd be abandoning what we've built here." Eleanor was quiet for a moment, her eyes thoughtful as she gazed at Ethan. "Ethan," she said finally, her tone steady, "do you remember the night we met? When you found me on that street?" Ethan nodded, the memory still vivid. "You didn't just help one person that night," Eleanor continued. "Your kindness set off a chain of events that has already touched thousands of lives. Imagine what you could accomplish on a national scale." Ethan sighed, leaning back. "But what about the people here? The Sarahs of the world, those who are just finding their footing. What happens to them?" Eleanor smiled gently. "The foundation you've built here is strong, Ethan. It won't crumble just because you're not here every day. And think about how many more Sarahs are out there, in cities across the country, who could benefit from what you've learned." As Ethan mulled over her words, Richard joined them, settling into an armchair with his own cup of coffee. "You know," Richard began, his voice contemplative, "when Eleanor came back, it made me reevaluate everything. My priorities, how I ran the company, the legacy I wanted to leave. Ethan, you've been a big part of that transformation, but maybe, just maybe, it's time for you to start your own legacy." Ethan looked between the two of them, their expressions filled with encouragement and belief in him. He felt a mix of gratitude and awe. "How did I get so lucky," he murmured, "to have mentors like you?" Eleanor laughed warmly. "I think we're the lucky ones, Ethan. Now, what do you say we start planning how to take Callaway Cares national?" The next few months were a whirlwind of activity. Ethan worked tirelessly with the Callaways and the coalition of corporations to lay the groundwork for the national initiative. They hired a capable team to take over the day-to-day operations of Callaway Cares at the local level, ensuring the programs would continue to thrive. On Ethan's last day at Callaway Industries, he found himself back at the job training center where it had all begun. The halls were bustling with activity, alive with the energy of people pursuing new opportunities. As Ethan walked through, he was stopped every few feet by people wanting to shake his hand, thank him, and wish him well. At the end of the day, as he prepared to leave, Ethan was surprised to find a crowd waiting for him. A mix of employees, program participants, and community members. Richard stood at the front, a warm smile lighting up his face. "Ethan," Richard began, his voice strong and carrying across the hushed room. "When you joined Callaway Industries, you were a promising young marketing executive. But you've become so much more than that. You've become a beacon of hope, a catalyst for change, and an inspiration to us all." Ethan felt a lump form in his throat as Richard continued. "As you embark on this new chapter, know that you carry with you not just our gratitude, but our unwavering support. The work you've done here has transformed Callaway Industries forever, and we're committed to continuing that legacy." Eleanor stepped forward then, her eyes shining with pride. "Ethan," she said, her voice filled with emotion, "a year ago, you extended a hand to a stranger on the street. Today, you're extending that same hand to countless individuals across the nation. Never forget the power of that single act of kindness." As the crowd erupted into applause, Ethan was overwhelmed by emotion. He looked out at the sea of faces, colleagues, friends, and people whose lives had been touched by Callaway Cares, and felt a profound sense of gratitude. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with feeling. "All of you. What we've built here, it's not about me. It's about all of us coming together to make a difference. And that work doesn't end today. It's just beginning." As the gathering dispersed, Ethan found himself alone in the center, taking one last look around. A voice behind him made him turn. "So, this is really it, huh?" It was Sarah, the young woman who had thanked Ethan just months earlier. She stood there smiling, though a trace of sadness flickered in her eyes. "It is," Ethan replied softly, "but it's not an ending, it's a new beginning." Sarah nodded, her expression growing resolute. "You know, when I first came here, I thought my life was over. I never imagined I'd be where I am now. You gave me that chance, Ethan. You gave all of us a chance." Ethan felt his throat tighten as his eyes welled up. "You did the hard work, Sarah. You took that chance and ran with it, and now it's your turn to extend that hand to someone else." Straightening, Sarah's face filled with determination. "You're right, and I will. We all will. Your legacy here, we'll keep it going. I promise." As Ethan finally left the Callaway Cares Center, he felt a swirl of emotions. There was sadness at leaving behind what they had built together, excitement for the road ahead, and above all, a profound sense of purpose. He knew the path forward wouldn't be easy. Scaling Callaway Cares to a national level would bring challenges he couldn't yet foresee. But as he drove away, his car packed for the move to his new role, Ethan felt ready. Ready to face those challenges. Ready to continue extending his hand to those in need. Ready to keep believing in the transformative power of compassion. As the highway stretched before him, Ethan's mind drifted to that fateful night. To the woman he had met on the street, Eleanor. Her journey had changed her life, reshaped Richard Callaway's vision, and most unexpectedly had transformed Ethan's life as well. Together, they had already changed countless lives. And now they stood on the verge of something even greater. Ethan's phone buzzed, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a text from Eleanor. "Remember, Ethan, this is just the beginning." A smile spread across Ethan's face as a surge of determination filled him. "Yes," he whispered to himself, "this is just the beginning." The road ahead was full of promise and possibility. Ethan Carter, once a mid-level marketing employee, now a catalyst for national change, drove onward into a future he could have never imagined. He didn't know exactly what lay ahead, but one thing was certain. He would keep extending his hand. Keep believing in the power of kindness. Keep working to make the world just a little bit better, one life at a time. Somewhere out there, on a street corner in a distant city, someone was in need. Someone whose life was about to change forever. All it would take was one person to stop, to see them, to extend a hand, and Ethan was ready to be that person. Again, and again, and again. The journey that began with a chance encounter on a city street was far, far from over. In fact, it was just getting started. If this story moved you, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. For more tales of unexpected twists and acts of compassion, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.